Alright, so this is your boy Big Cass, and I want to talk about something that's, kind of dear to me today. And why it's really been on my mind is this right here. We're approaching like what I believe, the crowning jewel of like what I've been working on as far as videography wise and YouTube wise, you know what I'm saying? Just the 910 TV project, putting Fayettenam hip hop out there. So last Christmas Eve is, the passing of my mother passed last Christmas Eve. So it's bittersweet in that way. I always remember this time. But that was Christmas Eve 23 when my mother passed. Christmas Eve 22 is when we released the project called Fayettenam is Bomm Sheltuh. Real dope with me because one of the main things I wanted to do with my YouTube channel when I started was I kind of figured like as far as like, okay, so we're going to be trying to introduce people to the Fayetteville hip hop scene and show people what Fayettenam and Fayetteville is. And it's at the point now where, we have like probably the artist that most people in the music game would consider like the best rapper of this time, the best rapper of this generation, which is J. Cole. And, as far as I see, so many people don't really, know the origin story behind J. Cole and where J. Cole, came from as far as like an artist, especially like outside of like, the Fayettenam hip hop scene. So I wanted to try to, and even I didn't really know, what I'm saying? And I learned a lot, on the way, there, I remember when I was first, talking about the project and putting it together, a good, a guy that I work with, a friend of mine named Lizzie Santana, who's a media personality as well. He was constantly asking me about he had did an interview with a guy named Ronnie C, who was saying in the interview that he was the person that got J. Cole his deal, and he asked me about that a couple times, and I told him, I didn't know, too much about that, and I was able to find out, a lot more about the role Ronnie C played in the situation and why he was saying that, especially from from Mozzie in the interviews that he was doing. But I remember that time telling, Mozzie, like, nah, as far as I know, Cole came from this camp called, Bomm Sheltuh, all-terrain music. And I had showed Mozzie, the guy who's the leader of the groups, named Nervous Rex, showed him his Instagram, like, hit this guy up and, try to set up an interview with him and, I'm going to do the same. And so that was shortly after I got back. It's crazy, like I said, the timeline. I came back to Fayetteville at like the end of May, to, care for my mother. The end of May of 22. And then, like I said, that same year, 6 months later is, when we released the Bomm Sheltuh. Some call it a Keepin It A Band interview, which it is a Keepin It A Band interview, but I really call it a documentary, and shout out to Lizzie Yayo and Keepin It A Band for hosting it, but I really call it a documentary. I mean, we go deep into the story of Bomm Sheltuh and where they came from and the perspectives of the two and how, J. Cole came up out of there and everything. And it's a real, dope interview. And like I said, to me, at this point, even, 2 years later, the crowning achievement as far as like, the YouTube side of what I've been doing, because it's literally, the essence of what I'm, want to put to the forefront, the Fayettenam hip hop scene and teaching people more of the origins of the Fayettenam hip hop scene and where some of the greatest came from. And now there's two reasons why I want to talk about this subject. Well, really just one. Two, because like I said, it's the anniversary of that. And because of that, I've been thinking about this person a lot, and just I feel like I owe it to him. And the reason I feel like I owe it to him is because I'll start with this. Like, Bomm Sheltuh is, the origin of Fayettenam hip hop, from where I come from, in my mind. They're OGs, they're elders to me, they're somewhat before my time. When they were releasing records, I was in high school. I even tell the story about like, I remember when we dropped the project, they, Nerve kind of co-dropped, the project along with Keepin It A Band, Fayettenam is Bomm Sheltuh documentary, and had people do like kind of shout outs. And in my shout out, I kind of told the story of how like, when I was a kid in high school, I would skip school all the time and go to this place called Paradise Records. And at Paradise Records, they had like a consignment section. And Paradise Records was like a ill record store. they had a copy of every record in the store open that you could hear. And it mainly played, not mainly, but it played a lot into the consignment section. So they had like one row in the middle of the store. It was dead. At one point, it was always in the middle of the store. At one point, it was in the front, like right by the front door. Later, they put it in the middle of the store by like the vinyl. But I would see these Bomm Sheltuh records in there. The first Bomm Sheltuh joint, Food, Clothing, and Shelter, came out when I was in like ninth or 10th grade. And I remember like going to Paradise Records and like listening to it, the free copy that they had. So I never actually had a copy of it myself, and was never able to really like study the music until like later on, meaning like now that it's been re-released, and the study that I did, the prior year prior to me coming back to Fayetteville, during that year leading up, and also the year after I first got back, I listened to so much Fayetteville hip hop. Like I studied it a lot. You know what I'm saying? I remember at the moment, like that May when I first came back, May of 22. I remember at that time I was studying. I was listening to so much of Fayettenam hip hop. When I got back, and I remember at the time, probably the artist that was like running around making the most noise at this time was this guy named BZ. And probably the hardest record that I thought was out was this joint. Hood the Mayor had this song called The Joint Crunk Ain't Dead. And that record was hard. The record was hard, and the video was so hard. It was like, I thought Hood the Mayor was about to blow up and be the next Jay-Z right then. That shit was so fucking hard, and the visual was so fucking hard. But I started to listen to a lot of hip-hop at that time, and then like I said, luckily, they put the Food, Clothing, and Shelter up on DSPs, and I was able to study that a lot. And the other record, the compilation record, the Fayettenam Bombers, I believe I was in maybe like the 11th grade or maybe the 12th grade when that came out. But then my first album, came out the year after I got out of high school. So, things were moving that fast, as long as like, the inspiration I was taking in. Like I said in that little drop I did when they released the Food, Clothing, and Shelter, like more than anything, what's sitting in Paradise, I remember it to this day, like sitting in there, the little section where you could sit, the section in the corner where they sold the record needles. They had like a section in the corner where they had like all the different needles for different vinyl records, and that's where I would sit and listen to music. And I remember sitting there and talking to the store manager and just talking about how crazy it was, like the imagery and like the level of presentation that was in that album. Like I had never seen anybody, that from Fayetteville that efficiently put off hip hop. Like it was just as good as album as like any other album that was out around that time, in production, in rhymes, in recording, in mix, but also, like I said, just in presentation, like, like the cover and everything. So I thought it was real dope, man. And then, like I say, the timeline. So the end of May 22 is when I came back and really started working on the project. And then the end of December, Christmas Eve is when, 6 months later is, by that time we had, already did the documentary with Bomm Sheltuh and Lizzie Yayo, and we released it on, Christmas Eve of 22. And then the end of May 23 is actually when Filthe was murdered, rest in peace. And then 6 months later, by the end of 23, Christmas Eve 23 is, when my mother passed. And so this is the 2-year anniversary. This is, those are why those dates and those times stick out to me. But this is, the 2-year anniversary of, us dropping, the Fayettenam is Bomm Sheltuh documentary. And I really, it's a jewel. Like, I look at the content that we create, on YouTube as not just like content creation that we just putting out right now to just get likes now, but I look at it like things like that Fayettenam is Bomm Sheltuh, documentary. 10, 15 years from now, people will be, looking at that interview and, just finding out who Filthe is and finding out who Bomm Sheltuh is and going back and studying and finding and discovering and exploring the music. But one thing I'm also glad is I'm so glad that we were able to get the interview, because I do believe, that's probably the only interview that I've seen. That interview and the interview Mozzie did, and the interview Mozzie did is like a little different because it's more of like a podcast type thing, And then what we did, keep with the Keepin It A Band though, that was more like I said, like a just like a deep sit down like story of Bomm Sheltuh, and then like a visual, the background visuals to tell the story with it, which is why I kind of say it's a documentary. And so that way, it's probably some of the very little bit of footage of Filthy that's, online, aside from his personal social media. Even preparing, for that interview, I was going back trying to find some of the older Filthy videos that I had seen, the years prior to that when I was living in Myrtle Beach, and would go back to YouTube to see what people was working on, and I couldn't even find like that YouTube content. And he actually talked. If you go back and look at the Fayettenam Bomm Sheltuh documentary, he actually talks about the videos I'm talking about when he tells the story about how he went out to Cali with the girl that was shooting the video. And you'll have to watch the documentary to catch that whole story, but it's a funny story. So, like I said, go check out Fayettenam Bomm Sheltuh. But during this anniversary, and the reason it's been on my mind, and I feel that I owe it to Filthy, is because he was very adamant about it. And not only was he very adamant about it, but I'm also feel a very personal attachment to the subject, which is mental health. Now, I talked all this stuff about like just getting to really know more about Bomm Sheltuh as a group, during that time period. So after doing that interview, over the next, really probably the next 6 months or so, which is probably only the amount of time that he lived, but during that 6 months ago, I actually was able to get to know Filthy a little bit and had a bunch of conversations with him. And during that time, one thing I really discovered is I would watch his social media and the stuff that he would post, because he would kind of post like he would post like kind of like little exclusive joints that he did, as well as send me like he would all the time like send me like little links to like maybe like SoundCloud posts from like the stuff that he was working on with Sean Beeman and stuff, and or maybe some tracks he had with Ford. He would send me like the little links and let me check it out, and that's when I realized like how dope a MC he really was. Like doing like that year, like just going back, listening to what he was doing on, those Bomm Sheltuh albums, and also listening to like, that music that he was making after that, and all of those snippets that he was letting me hear, mainly of, what they call the Ratchet set, the hip hop collective called the Ratchet set, and just really coming to understand like he was the best, like, and I think he kind of understood, even looking back, he probably really understood his role even in the group, like, like with Nerve kind of being like somewhat like, the mouthpiece, the beat maker, the producer. He really more so, stepped into his role as like being the rapper and being just so completely lyrical. And so that's why I think he's definitely the best rapper from the Ville, technically. Now, like I said, I would tell people my favorite rappers from the Ville, ironically, are like J. Cole and Rain 910. Cause I like the songs. I can identify with the flow and the tempo of the songs, the production and beat selection. I really like the songs, but the MCs who I feel were technically the best MCs at this point are both passed, and that's Filthy as well as Up South 30. And funny story, ironically, my last conversation with Up South 30 was him telling me to go suck a dick for being a Trump supporter. But salute the the God of South 30. Like I said, technically when you talk about MC rhyming skills, I'll give it to him and Filthy. But like I said, I did really enjoy that final 6 months of his life. Getting to really talk to him, Filthy, and get to know him. Something I never even really had the opportunity with Nerve to do. Mainly because probably the type of person I am. I don't do a lot of talking. You'll be hard to find somebody that said they was on the phone or had a conversation with me for like more than 5 minutes, or what I'm saying, I don't be talking like that. Not that I'm antisocial, just like I'm not into that shit, man. Especially if I'm not around, like, if we kicking it, we conversating, but I'm not finna call you on your phone and be talking to you for like 20, 30 minutes, mainly because, man, I be chilling, man. I be smoking weed. I be listening to music. I be like in a different zone. But Filthy, I mean, I remember nights, like mad nights, like times when me and him would be on the phone, like we may get on the phone at like 10 p.m. and we be on the phone from 10 p.m. to like 4, 5, 6 a.m. in the morning, just chopping it up, just about, different shit, hip hop and all of that, life and all of that. And I would come to find out that this is the type of relationship that he actually had with a lot of people. Like, he had a lot of people that he had this same exact relationship with, which is crazy to me. Like, how do you have that much time to talk to that many people? But a lot of people do, from what I understand. And I'm the only person that really don't talk to people like that. But during those conversations, he was so adamant about the subject of mental health and wanting to do something about that. Like, he suffered badly from mental health issues, as I do, as I think we all do. They have these things that they call mental health disorders, and they tell people they mental health is fucked up. But I mean, who mental health ain't fucked up? Who do you know who ain't all fucked up in the head right now? But it was a special subject to Filthy, and one that he really wanted to work on. And even in his role as like being like the mentor to J. Cole, it was something that he wanted to like he wanted to like show people how he was working through it, and show how that, could find a way to help other people dealing with similar situations. And I'm another person that's always really in my head. Like, I remember having a conversation with my mother during, those final months when she was alive, and she was telling me like how good I was doing at taking care of her. And another conversation I had with the aunt of mine, and she was just telling me like, after she passed, she was telling me like how good I took care of my mother alive, telling me how good I was taking care of her. But in my head, always overthinking, and you always wondering like, am I doing enough? Like, did I do enough? Like, was I doing all the right things? That's the, where I'm at. I'm always in my head. And and even with the Filthy situation, and like I said, a lot of people had these type of relationships with Filthy. So I've heard other people, even say kind of things too, like, and even seen people make certain kind of comments like, could they have done more to help? And a lot of times I feel really bad about it, because during the talks that we would have, I'm always so like pushing, what I think is dope. Like, at this time, I'm really coming to learn Filthy as an MC and how dope he is. So like, I'm constantly telling him like, man, get back in the studio, get in the studio, drop some songs. I'll help you. If you having issues finding the studio or finding the beats, I'll help you, man. But you need to, you so fucking nice at what you do. You need to be recording. We need to be shooting videos for that shit. And he would literally be like, that's not where I'm at right now. And then he would literally tell me, this is what I want you to help me do, Cass. And he had the idea of what he wanted to do was, he really wanted to document his issues with mental health, as far as like on a day to day, like literally have parts of it where he would be talking the way I'm talking to you now, talking about, what he was going through with his mental health, why, and things that he was going through in life. And then like have it cut from like a scene like that to like cut into a scene where like I'm literally like the cameraman walking behind him, like going to the courtroom with him, where he's trying to like work on some stuff he got going on with the courts and the government, like over like his mental health and the disability, claims and different stuff that he got going on with that. And then going to see his caseworker, and going to these like different appointments and meetings with him. I thought it would be a dope, but I didn't necessarily know if it was the content that I wanted to work on at that time. So I would kind of always push it to the left. But what I would push to him to do was like, okay, if you ain't really stressing, that rap shit right now, then let's work on the other project that you're working on. Because the other project that he was always talking about was a project that I was really interested in and I was really feeling. Now, as far as like the mental health documentary thing, I also was kind of stand off of it, because as he was describing how he wanted it to be done, there was also people that would have felt negatively about the things that he was saying in it. But the project that he was working on that I really did want to, pursue more was a project up he had where he had these masks, and he would make these masks himself out of like different materials, and they were like, he was a creative artistic dude, like, you know what I'm saying, like it's no surprise to me that he was such a incredible like poet and rapper, because he was a creative person. Like I said, these masks he were making, they were just wild. But he had a show with these masks, and I really wanted to do it because I thought like, damn, okay, so that's something different. We could literally do like, like some, in my mind I'm thinking back to when I can't remember, I don't know if it was Dave Chappelle or who was, but you remember when Dave Chappelle had did like, I think it was Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock had did that like that puppet show where they had like the puppets on Sesame Street talking about how they had got like, venereal disease. Like we could do like some crazy bugged out shit like that, like some shit that they not even expecting for us to do. But we could literally shoot like our own like, like adult like cartoon puppet show and have that shit fucking go viral on YouTube. But the reason that I kind of fell back from that is because the further we got into like kind of trying to come up with this first screenplay for it, I came to find out like, again, like his vision of it was a lot different than what I had. His more so like the actual puppets. The puppets were like actually like band members of this group that he was a part of called the Ratchet Set. And then he was like actually telling, the stories of what was going on in introspect. And again, a lot of it, not only that, but some of the stuff that he was talking about actually involved like real people and like people that I don't even know, and I didn't want to like be involved in like, disrespecting them or even doing anything that they would take as disrespect in any way. So I kind of fell back from it. But now, I look back to how he was like pushing me so hard to fuck with him on the documentary about the mental health, and to be able to, if I could think back now, like that might have been it, man. Like, like not on, and when I say that might have been it, I mean, I'm saying like on a level of like, as far as, what we trying to do, like the exact content that we need that would like blow up and, would drag the attention to the YouTube channel that we want, to where we can get more subscribers and more followers. So for that, when we put the music out, it's out on a bigger platform, because I believe that a lot of people deal with mental health issues, and I know because I deal with them a lot. Like, what I'm saying, I have real, a lot. I have real dark periods where, I mean, everything could be going right. Like it could look like everything is going right. Player doing everything he want to do in every way he want to do it, but for some reason, you're feeling dark in your head, and you're dealing with depression in your head. Something just missing that ain't there, that need to be there. And my relationship with God has always helped it a lot, to bring me back to focus. But it's something that you deal with every day. And I know a lot of people deal with it. A lot of people have a lot of, dark thoughts. And a lot of people are dealing with a lot of things in their life. And during this process, he was posting a lot of wild stuff on social media. And maybe about a month before he was killed, he had posted something on social media where he had like a shotgun. He had a shotgun that he was loading, and he was like telling people that he was sorry about what he was about to do. And, and again, this is just like me building with him for a couple of months. So I'm like wondering, like, is this like some kind of cry for attention? I mean, is he really bugging out like that? I didn't know, but I knew like some of it was familiar, and I knew some of it was familiar just from me. One of the things that I deal with is as somebody that people probably would call like, I guess people call certain people like people pleasers, and I never thought I was a people pleaser, but I understand, what people mean when they say that. Because like I said, I don't aim to offend people. So the passiveness at some points, when you're a passive person and you allow for things to happen and you allow for things to go on around you and not really speak up on it, I mean, it's only temporary, especially for me. Because at some point, the stuff that I'm putting up with and bottling up, at some point, it's going to explode, and I'm going to lash out, and I'm going to hurt people with my words. At the least, I'm gonna hurt people with my words, but at the most, I need to guard myself because it could come to the point where I could actually even lash out, like, in other ways, and like I said, unnecessary things. So like I said, I have to really control my anger, control like what's going on around me, control my environment, control my thoughts. One thing I also have to, really have to learn is how to control my thoughts, So I really understand the mental health thing, and Filthy was a good dude, man. It's so crazy to me because he truly felt that he was alone. He truly felt that nobody really cared about him. He truly kind of felt that nobody really fucked with him. But the reality is, so many people cared about him. So many people fucked with him. So many people loved him. And they loved Filthy and they loved Carlos, which is another thing. He would always talk about the difference between Filthy, the rapper, and Los, the person. Something that I always, it's funny and ironic to me because it's something that I always joke about too, like the difference between Big Cass and Ronald, But a lot of people loved him, a lot of people fucked with him, and a lot of people miss him. People miss Los the friend, and they miss Filthy, the lyricist, the rapper, But the video where he had released like several disturbing Instagram video posts in a row, but the one where he had the shotgun and he was kind of like threatening people and like saying sorry and warning people about what might happen. It's almost like when I seen that, something, and I regret this, but something in my mind told me like, you gotta fall back from Son. Like Son is like bugging out, and it's nothing you could do to help him. You've given him advice on some levels, but that's not where he's at right now. He's gonna do something, you know, probably do something dangerous. And the main thing that you need to do is to not be involved in it because it's gonna go left and it's gonna go bad. And looking back at it, like when you get older, you're so cautious and more cautious than you ever were. But it's like it makes you wonder, like, what kind of nigga are you to be like that when you could have been the one where, like, say during that time where like he was making all of those posts and running around doing all that crazy shit that led to his death, which was basically just running around, letting his mental state run wild. What if during that time I had put him in the tuck and I basically had him just with me running around doing exactly what he wanted to do, was filming that the documentary about his mental health issues. Probably not only would, when we finally put that together, it would have been a masterpiece, but it would have helped. So many people would have seen that and related to it the way I did, and it would have helped so many people. And not only that, maybe it would have helped him, and maybe it would have saved him just by taking his mind off of all of the crazy shit that was going on around him, and especially the stuff that what led to his eventual murder. But you never know. And like I said, I mean, these are just my thoughts, and I'm somebody who's just like a new friend that barely knew him. I'm sure people that grew up with him and known him his whole life, they were probably having these feelings, and probably to this day having those feelings times 10. Like I said, I've seen other people who were, friends and associates of him, say this and make those statements, Even heard, a lot of people say that at his memorial, But we can't change the past, and we can't allow it to eat us up inside, because that's the main thing, of the mental health is, those thoughts eating us up inside, and, those thoughts just completely running back and forth in our mind like a movie projector over and over again of all the mistakes and all of the mistrust and all of the things that we feel people have done to us to do us wrong, just running in our minds over and over again, and us being unwilling to talk about it with other people, whether that be therapists or just our family and friends. And not only that, not only being able to talk of it, due to rejection, but just literally not being able to talk about it because we can't get the words out the right way. A lot of times we come to people, which I think Filthy was, doing, coming to people and almost pushing them away in some sense, because you just seem so like, and you seem like you're having such like a moment at the time of like you're kind of like out of it, you know what I'm saying, to the point where people have to be like, let me give his son a moment, you know what I'm saying? And then you be like, let me give son a moment to get himself together, and then you wake up one day and you see that text or you see that Facebook post, Dad rest in heaven, and then damn, like how, what the fuck, But we have to figure out, ways to promote positivity and, being able to come together and figure this world out because we can't do it alone. And the brother Filthe Ritch, man, rest in peace to him, man. Shout out to him, rest in heaven, man. Again, he was a very special brother, special for so many reasons. And like I said, it's crazy that his own mental health and what role that played in his life, and just how much passion he had for trying to get through to other people about it and shed light on the subject of what he was going through, because a big part of, what he wanted to showcase with the documentary was, like I said, us going to court and showing, what was going on. On a lot of levels, he felt like the people who were like, in charge of helping him were like hurting him, for different reasons and, just different things that I won't, speak on right now. But, we just need to do better at helping each other, helping our family, helping our friends, helping the people we work with, our co-workers, because people are going through things, and man, it's hard out here. It's hard as fuck, man. It's hard as fuck. Like imagine your little homie that you mentored and raised, grows up and out of nowhere becomes the number one rapper in the world, the greatest rapper in the world, and who, mentored and helped create him. You just seem like somebody that just can't get it together. Like no matter what you do, you just, aside from rapping and being the best rapper, everything you're doing outside of that just don't seem to be connecting, and you feel like, the world is collapsing on you. I mean, that sounds like a wild story, but in some way, all of us go through that, I even remember, some of his, like I said, that last 30 days of social media posts from him was crazy. And I remember even some posts where he even talked in there. He talked about how he was looking around on Instagram and looking at people's Instagram and seeing how some people seemed like they had it together and was doing what they had to do, and some people, and which is crazy because we all know Instagram and social media is bullshit, but we all look at it like that and compare that to us and where we're at in life. And it's no wonder, especially with social media and shit like that, it's no wonder that we all have so many mental health issues that we're dealing with. But the brother Filthe was special, man. He was a special person. I could tell from, the little memorial I went to, he was a special friend and a special family member, and to a lot of people just had so much, You wonder, like, I remember, like, my father, he used to always joke, and this is something that I kind of feel too. My father used to joke about how, like, when he died, there would probably be nobody at the funeral because, he didn't really have, But when my pops died, there was so many people at the funeral that had so much respect for him. People from the community that I didn't know that came up to me and were like, your father did this, your father did that. Like, and like I said, Filthe was one of those kind of people. He touched a lot of people's lives. People loved him as, as most like wild, passionate people, that live that kind of wild, crazy life are. They touch a lot of people in a lot of passionate ways. And a lot of people love them, man. And what he would want is for us to take away from what happened to him, that we need to be looking after our brothers and looking after our sisters and guarding them and guarding their mental health and helping them in every way, not doing anything predatory to them to take advantage of them in those situations, but doing everything we can to uplift them and get them through it, because we all go through it and we all need each other to get through it and to use as stepping stones. Rest in peace to the brother Filthe Ritch, the best rapper ever from Fayetteville. If you haven't checked the music, definitely go check those Bomm Sheltuh albums, and the Fayettenam bombers and the food, clothing, and shelter that was released back in 22. Check out that albums, man, and do your history, man. Do your history, man, because this brother was an incredible talent, man, an incredible person, and even those records that those boys made in the late '90s and early 2000s, man. Just like I was telling you about the YouTube content we creating, those albums, people will people that ain't even thinking about it or ain't even got that shit on their mind right now or will discover those albums 10, 15 years from now and be talking about how dope Filthy was. People will be saying, damn, that Son was even better than Cole. Like, so that's just how shit is, man. And we want to help people discover that and help keep the legacy alive, man. The legacy of Fayettenam and the legacy of, brothers like Filthy. You see Biggie over there making all kind of noise. He want to go out. So rest in peace to Filthy, man. We love you, brother. Bomm Sheltuh is Fayettenam. One.